Hello, I am Broxton. I am an aspiring meteorologist, and today we are going to be talking about multiple upcoming days of severe weather, including the slight risk for severe weather across portions of Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, with the most likely threat being large to very large hail. And when I say large hail, that means 1 inch in diameter or quarter size or larger. And when I say very large hail, I mean hail that is 2 inches or greater in diameter. So that's a slight risk. There is some uncertainty with storm coverage with this, but there will be a lot of fuel for these thunderstorms, and that's what's going to drive this severe risk. But then on days 4 and 5, I do believe we have severe weather outbreak potential. You can see day 4, there's a fairly broad enhanced risk that's already been issued in the day 4 through 8 period. This is pretty rare. We can see across portions of Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, there is a enhanced risk, and this is going to be for hail, damaging winds, and tornadoes. All modes appear possible. This will be the day that I'm likely to be covering the most because it has the highest amount of confidence combined with the highest potential for the event. I also think day 5 has a lot of potential, but I just don't have as much confidence with that, so we'll probably be talking more about the day 4. In the day 3, if there's higher storm coverage, we could end up seeing an upgrade to an enhanced risk, so it's not like you can just write this event off. I just think day 4 and day 5 have potential to be fairly significant outbreaks, so I want to talk about those the most. But we're going to start by looking at our NAM 3K for the day 3. And we're going to look at our mixed layer cape. This is a good way to measure the fuel in the air for thunderstorms. We're going to see as we get, that's Sunday. I'm going to get into the day on Monday. We can see how this very robust instability axis develops. Basically, anywhere I would say when you have these values above 1,000, that's moderate instability. And really, once you get into these yellow and oranges colors, that's where you start talking about strong instability, especially the oranges. And then these purples, that's like extreme instability. So that's what's going to be driving this severe weather risk. We're also going to take a look at our bulk shear, and this is, again, our shear really isn't there too much with this setup, and that's definitely good news. But we can see as we get into the evening hours around 7 o'clock Central Time, you can see, especially across northern Texas, an area of relatively greater bulk shear does begin to develop, and we'll probably take a brief look at the NAM for the day 3 as well, so we can see into the overnight hours better. But we can see this area of 40 to 50 knots of bulk shear. That's where the greatest severe risk would develop if this verifies. This has strong to extreme instability overlapping moderate deep layer shear, which would be very supportive of supercells and large hail and very large hail if storms were able to initiate. So we are going to look at the future reflectivity, and we're going to see that through 0Z at least, very few storms form. Would not surprise me if when we take a peek at the NAM, which we will in a minute, if a little more storms do end up firing farther north. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty with where storms fire with this event, so that's really going to be something we're going to have to watch, because if more storms do form, then we could possibly see an upgrade to an enhanced risk from the Storm Prediction Center, and that would likely be driven by hail. So we're now going to look at our energy helicity index, our blend of cape and shear. And we're going to see how, so this is Monday. This is like overnight Sunday. There's not going to be storms firing in this environment, most likely, which is why there's not really going to be a severe risk. But we're going to look, and we can see how these values, very high values here in this localized area of that extreme cape and localized greater shear, but we can see these overall values that, despite the very strong instability, there's still are sufficient values for severe weather, but they're not as high because of that lack of shear. And I do think through at least 0Z, which is about 7 o'clock Central Time, the tornado threat will be very isolated at most, because we're going to take a look at our 850 jet, and we're going to see that it's very weak. This is around, it's a little more in the afternoon, then again we get to 7 o'clock, and we can just see there's very little low level jet, and that will keep or very little 850 jet, and that will keep our tornado threat very isolated despite the likely supercell storm mode. But we're now just going to take a look at the NAM so we can see a little bit farther out. Let's see what it does with the low level jet a little later. You can see still really takes to get really like 1 o'clock in the morning to even get an area of low level, a really stronger area of a low level jet to develop. Let's just check and see if storms are in this environment. I haven't. So you can see they really don't develop there. And again, this is where there's a lot of uncertainty with storm coverage. I think storm coverage will definitely be higher than what the regular NAM is showing. Again, we saw on the higher res NAM, which is the NAM 3K there, where at least a couple storms trying to develop, and wouldn't surprise me if we get into the overnight hours, storm coverage increases some with that, as larger scale forcing would likely be arriving. So we're going to look at that. We're just going to show the dew point quickly and show the forcing mechanism here. It's the dry line. See, we get into the day on Monday. You can see this is what will serve. Here's our dry line right here. This is what will serve to initiate those storms. If they can develop, this is where they'll develop along and then move eastward from here. This boundary right along here. And then west of that, there's really not going to be any severe weather potential, at least on Monday. There will be on Tuesday. So now, let's take a look at that Tuesday risk. We're just going to zoom out some because of the more broad risk area. Let's see, or can we zoom in on the central United States? Will that work? I think this will work. So we're going to take a look at our Cape first. Let's get into Tuesday. You can see how our as we get into the evening hours, this robust instability axis is going to develop, moderate to strong instability. Here's our dry line right there. Models are showing a capping inversion again, which is warm air aloft that can suppress storm development, though most of them, here look, you can see there's not much of it left by only get into the evening hours. So I will show you how the NAM doesn't really show any initiation here, but based off the fact it's right next to a very tight dry line and there's very little convective inhibition or cap, that would make me think storms would be likely to fire there. And similar story up here. Actually, no, there is a little more of a capping inversion there. Just gonna take a look. We can see how these photographs are looping, which would favor a tornado threat with supercells that do form. And I will say another similarity to the Monday threat is that the bulk shear is not going to be incredible. It's certainly still going to be there, but not going to be as high of an amount as what you may think for a potential severe weather outbreak and tornado outbreak. You can see as we get into the evening hours along the dry line, perhaps 40 to 50 knots of bulk shear, which is definitely sufficient, though sometimes you would look for a little bit more than that. And also, we get around peak heating, this is around 4 o'clock central time. There's not as much, so storms initiate earlier, then maybe they'll be over here compared to here, and then there maybe won't be as much greater bulk shear, but butterfly effect, so we don't really know if that's going to be 100% the case. But a big difference is that, unlike on Monday, there is going to be a very strong low-level jet in place, low-level jet 850 jet. So we're going to see, here's 4 o'clock central time, if storms develop in this environment, a 45 to 55 knot low-level jet. So there's too much of a capping inversion at that point. But the low-level jet's only going to strengthen further. And as we can see, 45, 50 knot low-level jet across portions of central Oklahoma would definitely favor a tornado risk. Again, there's still some capping inversion, but I think that could be overcome, and because of that strong low level jet, we can see the looping hodograph there. Just check areas up here where there's a 60 knot low level jet. Again, there is a capping inversion, so we're just going to look at our cap in like a overall parameter. You can see it easier without having to check a sounding, and we're just going to see where the NAM wants to erode it. You can see this area, the peak heating. It stays a little stronger for areas further north. Again, we're just going to have to watch this because any surface-based storm that does develop would be capable of all hazards. Damaging winds, very large hail, tornadoes, perhaps even some strong tornadoes with supercell thunderstorms because of that strong low-level jet. So we're just going to have to watch and see how that develops. Look at our storm relative helicity values. We can see as we get into the evening, here we go at 7 o'clock, we can see they're sufficient for tornadoes, especially across Kansas. Strong tornadoes, but again, there's going to be some uncertainty with storm coverage that's going to have to be figured out, but again, any surface-based supercell that forms in this environment would be capable of tornadoes, and again, some strong tornadoes as well, so we're just going to have to watch and see how that evolves, because that could be a very dangerous setup, especially for portions of Oklahoma and Kansas. And so let's see, what else could we look at? Let's look at our surface-based cape and the hodographs crossover, so we can really see the looping in these hodographs as the storms develop. So it's as the instability increases, you can see these turning hodographs are going to support a tornado threat with any surface-based storm. Again, I think we will see them, and really look by 0Z 7 o'clock. Look at that very turning hodograph. Weak cap that can be overcome. Strong directional shear. We saw the strong low-level shear. Let's go right along the gradient of the dry line, right where storms would be developing. Even less of a cap. Still that turning hodograph. A good temperature dew point spread. Again, want that less than 20, so that's a very good temperature dew point spread. We're now going to take a look at our energy helicity index, again, a blend of instability and shear. You can see how, again, storms won't be forming at this point in the day, but how its atmosphere is already primed for severe weather. You can see here across Kansas and Oklahoma, area becomes to become even more favorable. And then by 0Z, again, any storms that fire right along this dry line would be in a very favorable environment for all hazards of severe weather, as the bulk shear seems to be locally maximized just east of the dry line. Combine that with cape that could be over 3,000 and a low-level jet of over 40, if not over 50 knots, especially farther north. That's a very favorable environment for tornadoes, so we're just going to have to watch and see how this evolves. And this is our supercell composite, which is basically another way of blending cape and shear and forecasting. Truly forecasting, because it assumes there has to be a storm in the environment, but shows you where an environment would be favorable for supercells if one developed. Again, we can see it right along the dry line. So this day really has my concern. We're just going to have to watch and see how storms do evolve as we get closer, what storm coverage is going to be. But this day does have me very concerned for severe weather and widespread severe weather at that. So now we're going to take a look at it on the Euro next. Let's see, do we have enough time frame to go into? We have enough time to see through 0Z, but on the... and then we'll go back to the 0Z. That way we can see even further. I'm going to show our moisture axis, how that develops. See during the day on Tuesday in the morning hours, getting into the afternoon by 0Z. See the dry line's not as sharp on the Euro, but you can still see it right here. It's our moisture axis that would be favorable for severe weather. You can see that. Let's take a look at our cape. As we get into the day on Tuesday, we can see how this instability axis develops. You can see how it plays it out differently. And the reason this instability is a lot weaker here is because storms have actually fired on the Euro and eaten up that instability. So let's take a look at 21Z here across central to eastern Oklahoma. A little bit of a weird photograph, a little bit of a cap that would be broken through, and we can see a very strong instability axis, decent directional shear. So that favors probably all hazards. On this particular sound, and the tornado threat wouldn't be as high because it doesn't complete the loop, it goes back, but you could still definitely see at least an isolated tornado threat with that. Again, that's just one very particular area. We're going to look at our shear now. You're going to see as we move in, it doesn't develop the shear as much as the NAM does, but even across this northern mode, it does eventually develop it, though by then there's a capping inversion. So again, there's a lot of uncertainty with this day. A little more, definitely more certain than Wednesday, but there's definitely some potential for definite potential for a severe weather outbreak. It's kind of an oxymoron, but potential for widespread severe weather does exist. Now we're going to show you the storm coverage, see what the Euro does with it. You can see afternoon hours these storms develop, likely be supercellular in nature, but then they eventually grow upscale on the Euro, move eastward, and probably a damaging wind. Really still all hazards given the strong instability and stronger low-level shear, but damaging winds may take over as the primary risk because of the linear storm mode that will develop farther east. Let's take a look at our 850 jet. As we get into see, it's a little more of a messy low-level jet. Still 30 to 40 knots across Oklahoma, 40 to 50 knots across Kansas, and then it ramps up further by 0Z. Again, keep in mind on this run, the storms are over here, so just take a sounding over here. And this might be behind where the storms were. Let's go a little farther east. Again, so we can see how that cap begins to redevelop overnight, which does happen. So there's a lot of uncertainty with this event, with storm coverage and stuff, but most of the parameters seem to be there for severe weather. So that is definitely a concerning day. We'll look at our CAPE and photographs overlap on this. See, there's still some turning, not quite as much as on the NAM. See, they start to turn a little more farther north, though does not really fire as many storms up here. But definitely you can see into the overnight hours if there's a surface-based storm that there is that looping photograph to favor a tornado threat with any storm, especially an isolated, discrete storm. We're now going to take a look at our GFS. Here, let's see how far the 12Z GFS is into it. I looked at the 6Z. Do we have enough hours to? Okay, we do have enough hours to look at the GFS 12Z. So this is kind of gonna be more of a live forecast. I know what happened with 6Z, but there's a lot of new information that goes into the models with 12Z, so there could be some changes from what I've seen. But I would like to give the most updated forecast still. So this is what we're gonna do. You can see during the day on Tuesday how this instability axis, moderate to strong instability, is going to develop. Very strong instability, in fact. GFS develops widespread values over 3,000 by 21Z, again around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The best shears are likely not developed yet. We're gonna check that out, in fact. Again, I'm doing this part live. I looked at 6Z GFS, not 12Z. Can see by 0Z, wow, 50 to 60 knot low-level jet across eastern Kansas. Let's see, there is a little bit of a capping inversion You can see it right there, though. I do think storms have the potential to punch through that, and you can definitely get robust supercell development still with a sounding like that. You can see all our Cape values are above 3,000, so that's a very strong instability axis and strong low-level shear, supportive of tornadoes. Let's take a look at our bulk shear and see what this wants to do with that. We can see our best values develop here. And again, I know I'm showing a bulk shear value of 50 to 60 knots. We just have to see where the storm coverage is, where storm initiation will be. Are the storms going to be here, or are they going to be more along this area? And that would definitely have a pretty large factor in where, and then, well, not in where, but would have a factor into where, but more how substantial the severe weather threat would be. So let's just check and see. Again, I'm doing this part basically live for you. And we can see the GFS still doesn't want to fire storms. Let's just take a look at our surface-based cap. See over a more widespread level. You can see by 21Z, look at this large area with no cap in the atmosphere, no surface-based cap. And then again, it comes back in by 0Z. Let's check where our dry line is then. I think if we don't have any cap, then we have a dry line there. It's a forcing mechanism, then more storms are going to fire. That's mostly how it works. Yeah, so we have our dry line right here. If we remember, there's not a cap left or warm air aloft, like temperatures warming aloft compared to cooling. And so we see there, you see this robust moisture access that we saw showed robust Cape and basically no cap. Then I would think we would see storms to develop here. And then again, 0Z, it's even sharper, though again that convective inhibition, cap, warm air, aloft, whatever you want to call it, basically all the same thing, does start to return. So we'll just have to watch and see how that evolves. I will make sure I have a video on this severe weather threat tomorrow as well. We're going to take a brief look at day 5 as well. Well, actually, let's see, is there anything more we can look at with day 4? Yeah, let's take a look at our storm relative helicity values at the 0 to 3 level. You can see by 0Z how they absolutely explode. And across this area in Kansas, there's not as strong of a cap. So that you can see that photograph does favor tornado potential. We're going to take one more thing. Our surface-based Cape photograph overlap. We're going to do that quickly. And then we're going to take a brief look at day 5. Let's see. Look at these long looping photographs across portions of Kansas and Oklahoma by 0Z. Again, 0Z is going to be 7 o'clock Central Time. So any surface-based supercell, especially supercell, but any really surface-based storm would have a potential for tornadoes. Especially with supercell would have a strong tornado potential in this environment. Though we don't know exactly what the coverage of storms is going to be. And that's probably my biggest question mark with this, is how does the capping inversion we're going to have affect the severe weather? Because if it can, we obviously want it to limit the severe weather, but if there's only like a weak cap in place, and then storms break through that, we could have potential for tornadic supercells developing off the dry line and marching to the east. And I think right now that's probably what the Storm Prediction Center is highlighting, because in their text discussion they said this is the area that has highest confidence of discrete supercells, this 30% area. So they are expecting that to develop right now, though there is definitely still some uncertainty with it being 4 days out. Just a brief look at our day 5 risk. There it is. Let's take a look at it on the GFS. Again, have not looked at 12Z yet, so the GFS are this far out yet, so it's kind of going to be a little bit live for you. It's Monday. Tuesday, let's get into Wednesday. You can see how our instability axis does develop here. You can see the photographs are a little more straight though. And I believe that's called I believe that's because the GFS probably ejected the 850 winds off to the east too rapidly. That's what it did on 6Z. Let's see if that's what it's doing again. Yeah, by 21Z, see how it's mostly areas farther off to the east. Definitely still some tornado risk. All hazards will be possible. There are steep lapse rates for severe winds. There are steep lapse rates for hail. Sufficient instability in shear for damaging winds, and at least some tornado risk. We're just going to have to watch this and see if there's a more favorable overlap of the shear. See what's going to do on Wednesday. But then the bulk shear is too far off to the west, so it's kind of messy on the GFS. We'll take a brief look at it on the Euro. So quickly. Let's see, Monday. There's Tuesday. Here's getting into the day on Wednesday. And by 21Z, it ejects the shear much cleaner. But now let's take a look at our cape. You can see here that by 21Z there's not as much cape. So then now the cape isn't really as much there on the Euro, despite the shear being there. At least the deep layer shear. Let's take a brief look at our 850 winds and see how they overlap. And they overall off to the east some, so we're just going to have to see how this develops. Both of these days, Tuesday and Wednesday, have severe weather outbreak potential. And again, storm coverage is definitely going to be lower on Monday, but if it were to increase some, there could also be, there is going to be a risk for significant hail, but that could be a little more widespread than what's currently indicated if storm coverage does increase some. So we're going to be watching all three of these days. I will be making a video tomorrow on it as well, and I will see you then. Bye.